Have you ever wondered how African men end up fighting in a war that has nothing to do with them?
I beg, help me bring my son back to Ghana.
Over the last few months, we have seen headlines after headlines of African soldiers fighting for Russia and Ukraine. And as I watched the story unfold, I kept asking, how do these men end up fighting so far from home? One story was of Joshua Nkrumah, a young Ghanaian who is currently being detained in Ukraine. He was lured into the war like many others under false pretenses. And so I reached out to journalist Kent Mensah to understand how these young African men end up going from ordinary lives to war zones thousands of kilometers away.
I spoke with Africans from South Africa, Kenya, Sudan, Somalia, and then Sierra Leone. These are the African nationals that I saw at the detention camp. So basically, they all have similar stories. That is, they wanted to either go to further their education in Russia, or somebody told them that, look, we have employment opportunity for you in Russia. So nobody was straightforward with them as far as going to the front line to fight in the war. So they accepted those offers knowing that they were going to either go to school, and then they got to Russia and they realized that they didn't have enough capital or their visas expired, so they had to find a means to survive.
In 2025, Ukraine said that over 1,400 African nationals were fighting for Russia. In November, 17 South Africans were lured into joining mercenary groups and were trapped in Ukraine, while a number of Kenyans were also detained in Ukraine.
All the time my boy is crying when he's talking with. All the time he's crying because of the situation.
From these stories, I was able to track how the recruitment process actually works. So it goes like this. Young men finish school and with no jobs, bills to pay and families to support, they then move online. Once they go online, they start to see ads on social media like Telegram and Instagram shared by the influencers whom they trust and who then act as a middleman. The jobs sound safe enough and they think that they're going to work for private security, farm work or scholarships in Russia. The second step is where big money is promised. They told that they could earn over $2,000 a month, and for someone who's struggling to find work back home, this sounds life-changing. The third step is when they travel to Russia. Some travel via student visas, some travel via a middleman such as the influencers. But for both groups, they always end up in the same place. Once they arrive, things don't look as they expected, and by then it's too late because they've already left home. This leads them to sign contracts that they don't fully understand or don't have time to go through because these contracts are in Russian. At that point, they are so desperate to earn money and work that they sign the contracts. After this, they're sent for short military training, but after a few weeks, they're sent to the front line in Ukraine. It is at this point that they realize that this is not private security, but military combat instead. By then, it's too late. Some die, some are detained in Ukraine, while their families don't even know that they're fighting in a war. This is what happened to Joshua and many others. I was deeply affected when Kent told me he had to break the news to Joshua's family after his trip to Ukraine, and so I reached out to Joshua's father, who is desperately trying to get his son home. They had no idea he was even alive or that he was fighting in the war. This is a common reality for many families. Joshua is still stuck in Ukrainian detention.
Then my son has come to Russia. Not even that, he is not a Russian person, so they didn't take him back. They left him in Ukraine. That's why I want you to help me.
They had no idea that he had been trained as a soldier to fight on the side of the Russians. All they knew was that he was then staying in Dubai. He was working at the airport, and then he wanted to further his education. So he went to Russia. Based on interviews I've had with several of these victims, so to speak, they signed contract with they call them the National Defense, I've forgotten the full name, but the National Defense Council or so, as part of the Defense Ministry of Russia. So it tells you that officially, they are on the government payroll or the Ministry of Defense payroll. So basically, it all boils down to unemployment and then the economic situation in the various African countries. We have high unemployment rate among the youth in the various countries. So people are looking forward to where they can make greener pastures and then looking forward to traveling outside the country. Before this Russia-Ukraine issue, you realize that a lot of the youth always see Europe or America as a safe haven for them to have solutions to their unemployment situation or economic situation. So when this Russian-Ukraine saga happened, I think people also took advantage knowing that the youth can easily fall prey to it, and then giving them non-existent employment opportunities in Russia.
So what are African governments doing? Most African governments aren't monitoring travel to Russia, so assistance, if any, only comes post-detention. Some countries like Kenya recently have begun tracking this route, but they are a rare few.
I think there is a huge failure on the part of African governments especially when it comes to migration issues. The collaboration between African governments and their high commissions or their diplomatic missions is non-existent. So we need to find out who is going to Russia and for what. And I'm happy that Kenya has taken an effort to try to do this because their High Commission is now collaborating with Russia to know who is leaving Kenya to Russia and what are the reasons why they are going there.
This story highlights the unemployment crisis on our continent, which leaves desperate young men particularly vulnerable to being exploited. In South Africa, investigations began after a huge group were lured. But if systematic change doesn't happen, the cycle of economic entrapment will continue.